Hey there, you holy gorgeous soul. My name is Erin, and today we're going to be doing a little overview, or more like a deep dive into Pesach. So here we go. So like every single other festival, Pesach has a physical element to it and a spiritual element to it. The physical is the body. It's all about the laws, it's the practical things that we have to do, it's the yes and the no's. And then on the spiritual end, we have the deeper meanings, the beauty, the spirituality, and both of these go hand in hand to create every single festival that we have. And Pesach is a pretty loaded one. So here we go. The Seder means order. And I think that in Judaism, everything that has to do with Jewish spirituality, spiritual means we're putting the spirit into the ritual. And the spirit is the meaning, it's the fun, it's the experience, it's the deeper essence of why we're doing it. And when we learn about it, when we can actually engage in it, when we can feel connected to it from our heart, it makes the ritual that much more fun. So that's what we're going to be doing today, diving into the deeper meanings of why we do every single ritual. So first, let's just take a step back. If we think about where we are in this period of time, Pesach is on the full moon of the month of Nisan. Nisan is the month of spring. Pesach is also known as Chag HaAviv, the month of spring. And Nisan is just this month of miracles. It's a month of new beginnings, of rebirth, of recalibration, and really the month of miracles. Nisan comes from the word Nes. Nes means miracle. So this is all a month, an entire month of miracles. And the pinnacle, the climax of these miracle stories is Pesach. That is, the Passover story is so full of so many crazy miraculous miracles, and really that is the essence of the holiday. So first, let's just talk about the whole idea of Pesach. Pesach is really about the story of liberation, of emancipation, of being a slave people in Egypt, in a society, in a constricted consciousness that was all about the physical, about building huge structures and empire. And that is a consciousness that we want to leave behind, and we want to move into the promised land. The promised land is Eretz Israel. The promised land is the home of our civilization. It is where we can create a nation that is holy and that takes the physical that we got in Egypt, and raises it up through the spiritual. And that's why the Jewish people cannot just be a wandering people all over the world. The Jewish people, in order to fully be themselves as the Jewish people and have a law system, an economic system, an agricultural system, a military that is ruled by Jewish law, and even if not 100% practically like we have today, still on the level of ideas, and hopefully maybe one day we'll get there. But the whole idea is that we cannot do that. A Jew is not just about keeping Shabbat. We cannot be a full spectrum Jew without having the land. And that's why this story of Pesach is so monumental. And the whole mitzvah of the entire Passover and the Seder and the Haggadah and everything is to retell the story of the Exodus, and to tell the story of the miracles that the Jewish people experienced through the desert and everything that happened until we reached the pinnacle, the peak, entering the land of Israel. And now how beautiful that after 3,000 years that we have been wandering in the desert of exile, in the desert of every single continent and every single country in the world, and finally the Jewish people are home in their homeland. This is what Pesach is here to teach us, that the story is not just 3,000 years old. The story is happening right now. It's happening today, and Israel is still welcoming all the Jews with open arms, waiting for them to come home. So Pesach is really the story of hope. It is the story of having the audacity of hope. And who are the people that led the Jewish people in real hope? That was the woman. How do we know this? We know this because it says that בזכות נשים צדקניות נתגלנו במצרים ובזכות נשים צדקניות ניגאל. That means that in the merit of righteous women, we were freed from Egypt, and in the merit of righteous women, we will be free. What does that mean? It means that right now we're living in the times of the redemption, of the Geulah. The Jewish people and the world in general is going through such crazy, incredibly mind-blowing turmoil. And you know what it says? You know what Judaism says? That the feminine, the rise of Jewish women, strong, powerful Jewish women with real faith and real vision, those are the ones that are going to bring and redeem the Jewish people. So if you're a woman and you're watching this, know that it is up to you. Yes, it's up to every single one of us, but the Torah tells us that there is a specific and special role to play, especially for the Jewish woman. So, and all of this was led by Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron. Moses, as we know, was the leader that brought the Jewish people out of Egypt. And one thing that I wanted to share with you, and we'll bring it to a leader, a contemporary leader, and that is Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was very inspired by the story of Moses. On the day before his death, he gave a banging, incredible speech. And in his speech, he spoke about Moses. He spoke about the fact that Moses was the leader to bring the Jewish people out of Egypt and to the promised land. But God did not allow Moses to enter the promised land because, right? So what did God do? God granted Moses one last wish, and he let him see the promised land from the mountaintop. And Martin Luther King brought this story, and he said, we have difficult times ahead, and I may not be the one to get you to the promised land, but I have been on that mountaintop and I have seen the promised land, and I not be the one to get there with you. But I promise you that we will get to the promised land. And the next day, Martin Luther King gets assassinated. And really, the story of hope, and think about it, quite a few years later, Barack Obama then becomes the first Black president, and he fulfills that prophecy of Martin Luther King on that night and throughout his entire legacy. So Martin Luther King really brought that narrative into his movement. And I think that it is time, just like Martin Luther did, for Jews to recover the story of hope of the Exodus, for Jews to know that we have a promised land, and the promised land isn't just a land. That promised land is the vision of what the Jews are even meant to do here and be in this world at this time. So this whole story of the Exodus is not just there for us to remember about a cute little story that happened 3,000 years ago, but actually to help us remember and recall who we truly are as Jews and what our mission is. So let's take a breath, okay? Whew. Go back. If we go back to the Seder night, what is the biggest mitzvah on the Seder night? The biggest mitzvah is storytelling. It's telling the story of our Exodus. It is going through the 15 steps, and every single one of these steps that are written out in the Haggadah, which are Kadesh, Uchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, Magid, Rechza, Motzi, Matzah, Maror, Korech, Shulchan, Orech, Tzafon, Barech, Halel, Nirtzah, 15. Every single one of those steps, it says, are the spiritual journey of man from conception all the way to being a toddler, to being a child, to being a teen, to being an adult, to being a parent, to being an older person, a grandparent, and all the way, not just in terms of age, but also in terms of consciousness, all the way from conception to enlightenment. And that really the journey of man in this world is a journey of enlightenment. And they say that these 15 steps that journey is not only true on the level of the individual, but that journey is also true on the level of the collective, of all of Am Yisrael, meaning that as we left Egypt, entering Egypt was perhaps our conception. But as we leave Egypt, we are being born, going through the straits, the Meitzarim. In Hebrew, Meitzar, which is the root word for Mitzrayim, means straits. It's a constricted strait. In the same way that for a baby to come out of a woman, it has to go through these very, very, very narrow straits, and it causes the woman a lot of pain, and there's a lot of craziness going on. But as they go through these straits, as us as human beings, as we go through these difficult things in life that really feel like they're squishing us, that they're honing in on us, that we can't do it anymore, that scream eventually leads the baby to come out of that birth canal and out into the world. And for us as well, part of our birth as a people was going through Egypt. That was our birth pangs of going all the way through that Mitzrayim, that Mitzal, and coming in and out into the promised land. So that story, the 15 steps of the Seder, is, like I said, the journey of man from conception to enlightenment, and also the journey of the Jewish people from going into Egypt all the way to the promised land, all the way to the ultimate redemption, to Geula and to Mashiach. And really the beauty And really the beauty of these 15 steps is that each one has deeper meanings and hidden things. And one of the biggest things that we have to do on this night is ask questions. And in the same way that we encourage the children to sing Manishtana Halayla Azeh, what is different about this night? You know what's different about this night is that this night is meant to wake us up. It says that this night is the night where we receive a new soul for the coming year. Why? Because it is a night where all the gates of heaven are open. It's a night of transformation. It's a night where we may not even feel it on a conscious level, but things are happening. Because every single year, if you think about it like a spiral, the holiday Pesach might be at this point of the spiral every single year, but we're going up and up and up as we evolve, as our souls evolve, as the world evolves. And that's why every single year Pesach is this very powerful milestone for new beginnings. So anything that you want to change, any state of constricted consciousness that you want to push through and you want to transform, this time, the whole month of Nisan, and specifically the night of Pesach and the 7 days of Pesach, these are days of deep transformation. They're not just days of having terrible digestion because you don't eat chametz, but they're actual days of transformation. So let's go into that transformation and the different themes of Pesach. So one of the major themes, obviously, that we know is this idea of matzah and chametz. Why do we eat matzah? Why do we eat this flatbread? Chametz is when you put yeast with flour and water and a drop of sugar. What happens? All of it, the dough starts rising. It starts inflating. What else is inflated? Chametz represents our ego. It represents pride. So the journey of eating the matzah, the bread of our affliction is our pride. Our affliction is our ego. And this whole idea of Pesach is this nullification of ego and nullification of pride and crowning God as the ultimate king. It's not for no reason that we mention the Exodus of Egypt like 3 times every single day, and everything is all about getting us out of Egypt, the miracle of the Exodus, going into the land of Israel. Everything in the Jewish school of thought is all around, all our prayers, all the practices, they're all around this exodus from Egypt. Why? Because Egypt, the Exodus, was the inception of our faith, the inception of knowing that God is the one who brought us out, who is the one who promised us the land, is the one who led us out of it in miracles. So firstly, Pesach is the time to look within and without and look around and see relationships, see how your pride, how your ego might be getting in the way. So all of the idea of chametz and the reason that we eat matzah is all about this inflation of the ego, and that is why we eat the matzah, the flatbread. It's completely flat. It's egoless, okay? So that's the first thing, why we eat the matzah and chametz. There's also a deeper meaning behind all the letters of chametz and matzah, because if you think about it, chametz has a mem and a tzadik, and matzah has a mem and a tzadik, and the only 2 letters that are different between them is the hey in the matzah and the chet with the chametz. And the hey, the shape of the hay has the hole on top, and the chametz is full. So the fullness of the chet represents the pride, the fullness, and the hole in the hay, which is Hashem, which is God, is the deflation of the ego, and that little window at the top of the hay to let the light of God come into our heart and lead us in this life of humility. So that is the whole idea of chametz, and it's also very practical because that's actually what we end up doing every single day, is not eating chametz. Okay, we then spoke about the idea of Mitzrayim and Mitzarim. Mitzar being the constricted consciousness, the constrictions that we have in our lives, the straits. Every single person has their own straits, and you can make do with them, but really using Pesach as a time to be like, cool, what are these things that are constricting me? What are these things that are preventing me from getting me to the promised land? What is my promised land even? And you really using this time to help you bring awareness to them. And I can just say that it doesn't have to be a huge thing. You don't have to learn a million things. All you have to do is sit with yourself, close your eyes, breathe in your heart, and really ask yourself those questions, and your soul, your being, your subconscious, whatever you want to call it, it will give you the answers. So now really is the time to tap in to those places. What are your constraints, and what is your promised land, and how can you get there? Another thing that Pesach is that Pesach means Pesach. Pe is a mouth, and Sach means speaking. Pesach means a mouth that speaks. Why? As I said before, Pesach is all about this idea of storytelling. In Judaism, we have this idea of educating the younger generations. On Pesach, we encourage the children. We do weird things because we want to encourage the children to ask a million questions. And in that way, we strengthen their experience. We tell them the story. We help them learn the story. We help them relive the story. And of course, we strengthen their identity, and we strengthen everything that it means to them to be a Jew. Because when we know where we came from, and we can also know where we're going. So Pesach is all about speaking. Pesach is a time where we actually have a rectification of speech. I'm not going to go to that. It's like a whole spiritual Kabbalistic thing. But the whole idea of Pesach is to speak, to story tell. That is the biggest mitzvah, to tell the story of the Exodus. But not just the story that we were slaves and then we got unslaved. It's actually to tell the story of all the miracles, the transcendent miracles that happened to us. And I think that as Jews today, we may look back and say, miracles, how can miracles be? How can these transcendent things be beyond physicality? Like, I don't believe that. That sounds like really crazy. Let me just remind you that just this week, Iran sent 3,000 missiles into Israel. And yes, even though it wasn't an above nature matter, above the physical realm, above science, like, yeah, we just had really good ammunition that shot them down, I do still think that it is pretty miraculous that unfortunately only one girl was injured out of 300 missiles that could have killed hundreds of thousands of people and could have completely destroyed this country. So I do still think that as a Jewish people, we are protected in this land, even though we may not see direct crazy miracles that are above the laws of nature, but still we're experiencing some crazy things of protection that I think shouldn't be discounted. So Pesach is all about telling the story of the Exodus, and even more so telling the story of all the amazing miracles that happened to the Jewish people as they were walking through the desert into the promised land. Now, there's one woman that I want to just give shout out to, and that is Miriam. Miriam, actually, before the Jewish people left, they didn't even have enough time for their dough to rise, but Miriam had enough time to tell all the women to bring their tambourines and their instruments. And as they were crossing the Dead Sea, it says that Miriam was leading the women with tambourines and with circle dances. What does that mean? It means that the Jewish women had enough time to pack their tambourines because they knew that God would save the Jewish people. They had no doubt, and they brought their dresses with them. They brought their instruments with them. And then finally, when God splits the sea, the Jewish women leave and they start dancing and they start celebrating because they knew from the beginning. And it also says this in Eshet Chayil. It says, "Vatitzchak bayom acharon." She will laugh on her final day. Why? Because she will look back and she will say, I knew it all along. And the Jewish women, you know what they said? They said when they crossed the sea dancing, they said, we knew it all along. They had the faith, and that is the faith that Pesach comes to teach us. Pesach, there are so many more beautiful things that I would like to share, but we're gonna wrap it up here. And yeah, I love you lots.